program of diet, exercise, nutritional supplementation, and other therapies for the treatment of diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic diseases. He's an internationally known champion of alternative medicine, a powerful voice against the FDA abuses. He's a board member of ACAM in medicine, and that is the American College of Advanced Medicine, founder of the Whitaker Health Freedom Foundation, and co-founder of the California Orthomolecular Medical Society. His monthly newsletter, Health and Healing, reaches more than 200,000 subscribers. We have the February issue up there. And he has written 9 books, including Reversing Diabetes, Reversing Hypertension, Reversing Heart Disease, and Shed 10 Years in 10 Weeks. Dr. Whitaker has appeared on numerous national television and radio shows and has lectured widely all over the U.S. in issues of health and the political forces within the medical profession. I give you Dr. Julian Whitaker.
I feel very comfortable in this group. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Because I think you guys are almost as nutty as I am. It's like, I don't know, somebody said that if you took the United States on the East Coast, you grabbed it in New York, and you grabbed it down in Georgia, and you did a flip, all the nuts, fruits and nuts would wind up in California. I want to talk tonight about diabetes. I think I can go quite fast. We can have some questions and answers afterwards, because there's a great deal of awareness in this group that is not going to require a great, a lot of explanation. Alternative medicine. To define that, I think David Eisenberg defined alternative medicine in his 2 articles back in the 90s. And alternative medicine are medical therapies and procedures not taught in medical school or used in hospitals. You and I both know that what is taught in medical school used in hospitals are contiguous, and they make up the conventional medical business. But the wealth of material that is available that is not taught in medical school used in hospitals is quite large. Orthomolecular medicine, the use of substances that are common and essential to the body. It's important to understand that orthomolecular substances are both common and essential to the body in various dosages to engender health, prevent, and treat disease. This is the definition that Linus Pauling gave to it. He has added among his many contributions a valid addition to our language as an orthomolecular molecular term. And I think that the ability to isolate, identify, then manufacture or synthesize or extract valid orthomolecular molecules was the great scientific medical development of the last century. We take vitamins and mineral supplementations for granted. It's only 60 years old to be able to use vitamins. Irwin Stone, I think, is either Irwin Stone or, but I think it was Irwin Stone that won the Nobel Prize in the mid-30s simply for correctly identifying the molecular structure of vitamin C.
St. George.
Yeah, that was St. George's, right. And when we isolate these orthomolecular principles, and then we can synthesize them, and then we can dose them, makes this extremely powerful techniques for improving health and treating disease. The British seamen were called limeys. They've been called limeys for 500 years. Why? Why were they called limeys?
The whole thing is they got scurvy, and if they had limes or lemons, then they wouldn't die. They were just losing so many people. But
they had 50%. They had a 50% death rate. You go out to sea for the British seamen, you had a 1 in 2 chance of being tossed overboard dead from scurvy. They didn't know what scurvy was. They just knew that something happened at sea, and they didn't know what vitamin C was. But they knew that I think it was Peter Lynn, is that his name? Discovered that there was something in citrus that if they simply took it on board and dished it out and monitored it, that they would prevent it would prevent this condition. So we have this. One of the most miraculous discoveries in isolation of an orthomolecular principle was the isolation identification of coenzyme Q10. I shared the podium with Peter Longshan, and his dad had done a lot of work with coenzyme Q10. I hired him to write the scientific discussion, because I submitted to the FDA about 2 years ago a citizen's petition to require that the labeling of the statin drugs carry that the statin drugs, by blocking the HMG-CoA reductase, blocks the production of coenzyme Q10 in exactly the same manner that you block the production of cholesterol, and therefore when you get these large drops in cholesterol, you get an equally large drop in coenzyme Q10, and this is bad. And in fact, I think most of you know this, Merck was the company back in the early 60s who figured out how to make coenzyme Q10. They could synthesize it. The doctor that popularized, that did the study of coenzyme Q for most of this century was, what was his name? Somebody help me here. Yeah, Carl Folkers. Carl Folkers was a PhD bench scientist from Merck at the time. He figured out how to do it. He was so fascinated with this discovery of this molecule that he left Merck simply to study that molecule. Went to the FDA. The FDA gave him, a lot of leeway, but would never give him a new drug application. He spent his entire life. He founded the CoQ10 Society. They've been having annual meetings, or meetings every 2 years, all over the world. They have one in Los Angeles coming up in a couple of months. This remarkable substance has been completely shunned by the health providers and the schools and the medical schools in this country. And I consider it more important than insulin. When you look at the use of insulin, you're looking at the use of insulin in 1% of the population. About 10% of the population have diabetes. Of the entire diabetic population, only 1% actually require insulin. And you can treat insulin-dependent diabetes without insulin. It's very hard. I've never tried it, don't want to. But you can. But the 90 to 95% of the diabetic population are insulin resistant. They have excessive insulin production, something we'll talk about. It is not an insulin requiring problem. So only 1% of the population need insulin. Coenzyme Q10 could possibly help 25 to 30% of the population, and 60% of the population over 60 or 70. So the benefit that could come from this orthomolecular substance is not even recognized, and it's been around for 30 or 40 years. Okay, use of substances that are common and essential to the body and engender health and prevent disease is orthomolecular medicine. Xenobiotic, a compound that is foreign to life. All of you know that all prescription drugs are xenobiotic. And all of you know why. Somebody tell me. Because you can patent it. We're having this discussion on the way over here. Us orthomolecular docs, we like to have dinner and cry in our beer about how bad everything is and how there's glimmers of hope here and glimmers of hope there. And I say, no, there's not. There are no glimmers of hope. It's worse now than it has ever been, and it's getting worse. And the reason is the pharmaceutical industry, starting literally almost from scratch in the 50s, now has one lobbyist, 1.5 lobbyists for every congressman. 1.5. They have one substance, Lipitor. They garner $6 billion a year. And it's garbage. It's poison. They have Vioxx. They just kill anywhere from 25 to 100,000 people. So what? So it's like, it's not getting any better. And I think that the only area where it's getting better is simply within the public. And my mission over the last 30 years has been to forget the docs, don't even worry about them. Take your message to people. If people respond to the message, they will get benefit from it, and you can live a nice life in helping the people that want to be helped by this. And it is only people that change the profession anyway. Give me an example. When I was a third-year medical student, I was on the OB ward, and I delivered 30 babies. Now, these ladies that I delivered did not realize that I was just a third-year medical student. But I delivered 30 babies, and I rotated through when I was an intern. Now, when I was delivering babies in the mid and late 60s, husbands were really filthy creatures. They had to be kept in a room. They could smoke cigars, but they couldn't be anywhere near their wife or their child coming out. So they were filthy, and so was the mother. The mother had to be shaved, enema, and catheterized with tubes in every orifice. So the public got together and decided decided that, wait a minute, I'm not so sure birthing is a disease. So all of a sudden now the public gets together and the whole thing changes. Science had nothing to do with that. The docs didn't figure out that they didn't need to do things like that. A little turf war developed. They were losing patients to other. Patients were demanding things, and now it's changed. If I were to have delivered a baby the way they can be delivered today, in the mid 1960s, I would have been jailed. I would have been put in prison for this terrible neglect and potential harm to the infant. So the public is what moves the profession. The profession will never move. There's no reason for it. There's no reason for cancer docs to change. Why? They're doing just fine. All their patients die. They're just fine. They get paid just as much. They get their payment increases as the patient becomes worse. So, there's no reason for them to change. The only thing that will change them is other individuals seeking additional. This is why cancer is one of the most viciously protected of the medical professions. And here we have legislation in California that you can use cancer chemotherapy radiation only. These things are changing a little bit, but not much. So I don't think things are changing. I think people might be changing, and information is what changes people. Xenobiotic substances. Now, this is what's so fascinating about the prescription drugs and orthomolecular substances. Virtually all xenobiotic substances seem to block something. There's a calcium channel blocker. There's the beta blocker. There's the SSRI inhibitor. There's the, there's the MAO inhibitors. There's all this blocking going on. There's an HMG-CoA reductase blocker. So now you have these substances that have never been in any life form. The substance is only 15 years old as a molecule because it's just concocted, and it's a blocker. Now, the theory is that these blockers have a therapeutic benefit, and some of it can be measured. Okay, you have a beta blocker, you can lower the blood pressure. You have a beta blocker, that blocks the epinephrine and adrenaline response mechanism. You have a much lower heart rate. And now we, give beta blockers to people with heart failure. I mean, it's just insane. You give them to people with heart failure. Well, it cuts down the oxygen supply. So you have all these blockers. Now, orthomolecular substances facilitate. They make things flow through. One of the best examples of a facilitating orthomolecular substances is how you lower homocysteine levels. Where do you get homocysteine? Homocysteine comes from cysteine. How do they go this way for you guys? I'll get my mirror working here. Cysteine goes to methionine. But in the process, it goes through a little intermediary product called homocysteine. Then it goes to methionine. Well, if that process is not facilitated rapidly, homocysteine goes up and all hell breaks loose. You know, you got heart disease, colon cancer, arthritis, everything goes wrong when you get these homocysteine levels going up. But what do? Folic acid, B12, and B6 will cause this cysteine to go homocysteine, methionine. So then the homocysteine level comes down and everybody's happy. So it's a facilitator. Glucosamine sulfate builds cartilage, right? Good for arthritis. No, builds those cartilage in there so it doesn't creak as much. Well, it takes time to do that, but the one way to do it is very simple. In most equations, if you load up the left side, it's going to flow to the right. Like you put a lot of water on top of a hill, it's going to go downhill. So if you put a lot of glucosamine sulfate here, which is the essential molecule for cartilage, it flows over here. So orthomolecular substances facilitate. They facilitate this action. Now, what turned on Linus Pauling here, and I really am shaky on easy grounds to interpret Linus Pauling here, particularly this group, but I think what turned on Linus Pauling about this was not just vitamin C, but was the fact that 70 milligrams of ascorbic acid could prevent scurvy. But 7 grams, or even 70,000 milligrams, you can measure physiologic responses with no toxicity. It's the same with B12, it's the same with folic acid, it's the same with B6, it's the same with almost all true orthomolecular substances, except, of course, some of the minerals, which you can get some mineral toxicity from, but I don't know of any mineral toxicity from excessive uses of magnesium. So you have this incredible range of 100 to 1,000-fold in these orthomolecular facilitators in which there is no risk. Now, who in this room, and I don't want to embarrass anybody, well, someone raise your hand and pretend you are. Who in this room is taking a prescription drug? And if you're not taking one, just raise your hand and make one up. Yes?
I'm taking Mirapax.
Mirapax?
Mirapax.
What's it for?
The dopamine agent that floods the brain with...
And it's a xenobiotic drug. Okay? Excuse me?
Selegiline.
Flagelline. You take...
Selegiline.
Oh, wait a minute.
That's Deprenyl.
That's Deprenyl. You take Deprenyl, is that what it is?
No.
And you forget, I like Deprenyl. Give me a drug I can know. What?
Ribavirin.
What?
Ribavirin.
Ribavirin. All right, how many pills you take a day?
6.
6? Okay. You want? How about tomorrow? We want you to take 600. No. Who else taking a drug? Yes.
Prednisone, my mother's on 60.
60. How about tomorrow? Give her 600.
It could kill us.
No. Now, or 6,000. Now, a lawyer once told me that when you give this example, Doc, be sure to tell him not to do that. But this group, you're not taking really. Yeah, I mean, your drugs are pussyfoots. Yeah, what drug is it?
Ramipril.
Ramipril. All right, how much do you take?
20 a day. 20 milligrams a day.
20 milligrams a day, and it's for blood pressure. Okay, how about tomorrow? Let's take 2,000. You see, no one can comprehend. You know, you all have this automatic. No. You know, when you think about enhancing the intake of a prescription xenobiotic substance by a factor of 100. You only need 400 milligrams to lower the homocysteine levels, 800 milligrams tops. We use 5 milligrams of homocysteine in the office routinely. We used to give a lot of shots of B12 and tell patients, do not get anybody to test your B12 level. Because the doctor will go nuts So it's best, just don't test your B12 level. Just take your shot once, twice a week, you'll do just fine. So that's what turned on my eyes. Oh my goodness. Look at this. Look at these things, these molecules that you can find in the body that have these physiologic responses in which there's this such open-ended ability to use them without toxicity. Dr. Cathcart over here is taking 125 milligrams of vitamin C.
Grams.
125 grams of vitamin C every day for a year. Now, there's something wrong with this man. He didn't have diarrhea. So we were sitting around over this, we were trying to figure out what happened to all that C. It's, I don't know, he's breathing it out or something, I don't know. But there's these, that is why orthomolecular medicine is so exciting, because you have this incredible margin of safety and this very powerful therapeutic power, which physicians did not have ever in human civilization until just the last 60 years. And wouldn't you know it, that's the medicine nobody wants to practice. Oh, we humans. Okay, let's talk a little bit about diabetes. I think the key thing in diabetes is to understand that diabetes is a nutritional wasting disease. And I'm always uncomfortable, even in orthomolecular circles, when we talk about single elements. You know, whether it's iodine, I like iodine, please don't misunderstand me. Or whether it's even vitamin C, and I love vitamin C, I don't take enough of it, I'll take more. But, you know, when you're looking at diabetes, you got to look at a concert of things. It's a program. You don't think that Genesta sylvestre is your diabetes problem, you know, or that a single thing will help with diabetes. And there's a reason why diabetes needs a multiplicity of orthomolecular substances, and that is because the condition is nutritional wasting. It's even in the word. Diabetes means passing through. That means excessive urination. Mellitus is the word for sweetness. There's diabetes insipidus, which comes from the pituitary gland, lack of antidiuretic hormone. The levels of glucose in the blood, they act as a diuretic. And not just a diuretic, but an osmotic diuretic. And I think this group understands what that is. An osmotic diuretics are molecules which in large quantities flush into the kidney and overwhelm the kidney's capacity to concentrate and reabsorb, or rather just to reabsorb nutrient. See, the kidney flushes everything out into the tubules, and then it swaps things. It'll throw potassium and pull back the sodium. It will always pull back glucose. It's inherently designed to pull back glucose, because glucose is energy. It's one of the most valuable elements that the kidney will ever want to pull back. It'll pull back zinc. This is why you don't find a lot of nutrients in the kidney unless they're quite large in the bloodstream. Vitamin C can wind up in the kidney or in the urine. So the kidney saves the valuable stuff. When you throw in, when your blood glucose level goes to 170, 180, 190, it overwhelms the capacity of the kidney to save anything. And this is a concept which diabetics are never told. They're never informed of the fact that their disease and their complications are the result of this osmotic diuresis that is occurring day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, until body parts just fall off from the nutritional wasting. And this is one of those elements where it seems so clear and so obvious, so easily provable, you know, in which the remedy is so simple that you wonder, why aren't we giving diabetics copious amounts of all water-soluble vitamins to compensate them for their nutrient loss, which is what we don't. We've had, you know, maybe 20,000 diabetics come through in the last 25 years. We have not had one single diabetic, unless he came from an orthomolecular doctor, not one has come through even understanding this concept of the osmotic diuresis causing nutrient wasting, much less with any awareness of the importance of compensating for that particular loss. It's like I tell the diabetics or patients that, you know, we're walking around with our water-soluble nutrients in pails, and as we walk, we might slosh a little bit out. So we're replacing those. We use it up, and some of it just melt away. The diabetics, they've shot a hole in the bottom with a shotgun. So there's more than one hole. So they're just constantly losing nutrient throughout the life of this disease. Type 1 is insulin insufficiency. That's the destruction of the cells. I think you know this. Type 2 is insulin resistance, which is 90%. Most people in thinking of diabetes thinking that it's an insulin deficiency problem. You know, even though they know that obesity, lack of exercise, and insulin resistance, and syndrome X, and all this kind of stuff is a insulin resistance, they still think diabetes, insulin loss, insulin lack. 90% of those who have diabetes are producing excessive amounts of insulin. The insulin level is sometimes 2 and 3 times higher than the normal population. And we can measure that. You can measure with the C-peptide. We can now measure just with the insulin, with the blood insulin level. So the majority of diabetics have insulin in excess. Causes of insulin resistance are common: obesity, inadequate exercise, increased intake of refined carbohydrates, processed trans fatty acids, you know, just kind of unhealthy living. But I think it's primarily lack of exercise, refined carbohydrates, which then stimulates the weight gain. And then one of the problems, you know, one of the problems of the conventional treatment of diabetes, they make the problem worse. How does a conventional doc make the problem of this form of diabetes worse? Anybody say me?
Diet.
Excuse me?
Diet.
Low-fat diet.
They give the wrong diet, but there's something even more specific as to how conventional therapy of type 2 insulin-resistant diabetes makes the problem worse. Excuse me? They give them more insulin, and then what does that do?
It makes the cells more sensitive. Doesn't it?
That's very close. Very close. If I had some vitamins here, I'd throw you some. No, I do that. I just get ready. You try to answer a question, I toss vitamins. Somebody else? Yes?
They tell them to drink diet drinks.
Yeah, that makes them worse. Okay. Well, here's the real scenario. Both the oral drugs and insulin stimulate weight gain. What is insulin? It is a nutritional storage hormone. So, this is an actual patient. We had this patient. I didn't see him. He was being treated by his conventional doc for 10 years. He had mild onset diabetes, a little bit overweight. Put him on the drugs. So, you know, these conventional docs, they want everybody to have absolutely normal blood levels. Well, he was 15 pounds overweight. It's like someone with a 42-inch waist forcing him to wear 38-inch pants. You know, no, it's not going to work. So here's this guy, a little bit heavy, so his blood sugar is a little bit higher. So they put him on drugs, and his blood sugar still stays a little higher, but the drugs make him gain a little bit of weight, so the weight goes up a little bit more. So then they put him on insulin. When you put a heavy person on insulin, what happens? He gains more weight. right? If he gains more weight, what does his blood sugar do? Goes up. What does that stimulate the conventional doctor to do? Give him more insulin. What does that do to the weight? Goes up. This guy over 10 years gained 100 pounds under medical therapy. And because of medical therapy, and when I saw him, he was on 100 units of insulin. You know what I did? Sits down in front of me and says, well, stop your insulin. He freaks. He almost had a seizure. I've learned to be a little gentler than that. But this was in my young and passionate days. I said, stop your insulin. And he did. And his blood sugar didn't go up any higher. You see, I have docs working with me, and they're good docs, etc., but they've been traditionally trained. And they can't, you know, it's hard for me to get them to do things the way I would. You know, it's just difficult because they, you know, for them to stop someone's insulin of 100 units, it's like, it freaks the doc out. You know, and the drug, it freaks the people that are taking the drugs out. You know? But when I tell them to do it and they finally do it, they report, you know, the blood sugar didn't go up. I know. It's not going to go up. You get someone heavy, it doesn't matter. Stop everything. His blood sugar's not going to go up. It may go up 10, 12 points, come down. Put him on a diet, put him on some other things which we'll talk about, and things will get better. But if you think it's kind of hard for docs to do it, think about patients. It's very hard for patients to do it. You know, I had one, there's another woman and she was heavy, she was taking insulin, but I was writing and I said, well, first we need to stop your insulin, we'll do that today. His husband went up and said, come here, baby, we're getting out of here. But if you do that, then you can control the problem, you control the insulin resistance, and the weight will come down, the blood sugar will gradually come down, and it'll get better. So I think the major ones here is exercise, the carbohydrates, and the obesity. You control those three things with your diet, and you're going to do well. Oral medications, just dangerous garbage. Any more reversing diabetes books over there?
What? No.
You got one more? Is that for sale?
Do you have $10?
Honey? That book. I was going to say, that book, that reversing diabetes book is worth it for the chapter on the oral drugs. It took me a long time to write that book, that chapter. But that book is worth it for the chapter on the oral drugs. There is, yes sir?
What about the use of glucophage in small doses for people who don't have diabetes, like biomarker pharmaceuticals and Life Extension Foundation?
I've heard that, you know, and I know what you're talking about, glucophage and all this kind of stuff. It's metformin. It was taken off the market. The DBI drug was taken off the market back in the 70s, put back on the market in 1994. And I see absolutely no reason to do that. And I don't do it. I stop everybody's drugs on diabetes. And I finally got my docs to do that. And I know that they write about it. And I know Stephen Folks would probably argue with me on this. And I know he could probably win because he might know more about it. But, you know, I just kind of in this pattern that the lactic acidosis and the other things that are there, they might not be as bad with glucophage as they were with DBI, but in terms of a diabetic drug, and using to lower the glucose level, I know there are no studies anywhere to show that metformin or glucophage reduces the complication rate. None. Now, I also know that if you look at why I think the chapter in the book is so valuable, if you look at the studies which they did do back in the 70s, this was a 12-year study. They stopped it at 7 years because there was a substantial elevation in death from heart disease in one of the groups, placebo or drug. And the whole study was designed to see if the drugs that they knew it would lower the blood glucose level, but they did not know if it would alter the complication rate. And everybody went into this study, all the drug companies, all the scientists, they went in with this theory, this preconception, this assumption that by lowering the blood glucose level with the drug, the complication rate would be substantially reduced. And what happened? They found that the complication rate was substantially increased.
And that's probably because glucophage inhibits the absorption of B12, which would raise homocysteine, which they didn't measure at all in that study, right?
There are a lot of things they didn't measure in that study. As a matter of fact, they had to go back and actually study as to why that happened. With the glyburide, they think it had something to do with potassium and mineral imbalance that would engender some increased arrhythmia problems. With the metformin and the DBI, that was taken off the market at that time for lactic acidosis, but the DBI actually completed the study, and it had a 600% increase in death from heart disease. So that's why it was taken off the study. It had two things, lactic acidosis and increase in death from heart disease. And John Davison, this is really fascinating. John Davison was at Emory when I was there. He was head of the Emory University diabetic department. He was an endocrinologist. I knew him. I rotated through his service in the late 70s, the late 60s. And then I went off to do other things. And that study was published in 1971. And in Emory University, that had 18,000 active diabetic patients in its general clinic, a lot of them blacks, a lot of them ethnic, a lot of them indigent, 18,000 patients. He stopped all use of all oral diabetics. The only teaching institution in the entire world that did that. He has written a textbook, Clinical Perspectives on Diabetes. You know, it's fairly well used, and he had to go to Europe to get someone to write about the oral drugs. And then when you look at what the drug companies did to dilute the importance of the study. This is in the early 70s. If you think the drug companies were pretty good at covering up and diluting things back then, just imagine their efficiency at doing that now. But anyway, we just don't use the drugs. You know, maybe metformin has some value that I don't want to know about, but I just know. And I ain't gonna look for it either. And I'm not biased. I have an open mind if I ain't gonna use that drug. Anyway, if you look at the sulfonylurea drugs, on the layer it says that these drugs are reported to be associated with increased risk of cardiovascular mortality. Now, here's the insanity of it. This is in the PDR. It's been in the PDR for over 20 years. 30 years. It's been in the PDR for over 30 years. Why do you take an oral drug? Reduce your chances of having a heart attack. But right there in the PDR it says this drug increases your chance of having a fatal heart attack. And patients still take it. It's insane. You know, on the coenzyme Q10 Lipitor problem, on the HMG-CoA reductase, those statin drugs. Do you know that Merck had a patent? How many of you knew this? Pretty sophisticated. How many did not know? How many of you don't know about the Merck patent on CoQ10? Okay, good. You're very honest. Because if I didn't know, I wouldn't raise my hand anyway. But Merck knew all about CoQ10 because Carl Folkers worked there. They figured out how to make it. They tried to figure out a way to use it, but they couldn't patent it. And the interesting thing about them working with CoQ10, they kept trying to change it. they would methylate it, and they would carboxylate it, and they would ethylate it. And every time they did something like that, and then they put in the test tubes to see how these mitochondria work, it wouldn't work at all. So here was something that couldn't be changed. Now, progesterone could be changed. And hence we have Provera, which is not progesterone at all. It is a progestin because they have methylated it. And it has these progesterone-like qualities, but it also has 32 other side effects that progesterone doesn't have. So they couldn't do that with CoQ. They tried. Even the people that were making it for natural consumption tried to do that so that they could patent it. You know, there's a real incentive to change. They've tried to change DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone. You know, it's a cholesterol-lowering agent. They want to methylate that. There was a fellow that was working with a drug company trying to do that so they could patent it and then distribute it as a pharmaceutical drug, as a patented drug. But they couldn't change CoQ10. It's like this evolutionary force. You know, they got involved in perfecting this molecule for its purpose. Made it so perfect that you couldn't screw it up and have any function at all. And it was only discovered in a very serendipitous way. It came out in this tube and it came out yellow, and the guys that discovered it thought it was beta-carotene. And then they were doing research on these mitochondrial washes and stuff, and they threw this stuff in there, and all of a sudden they just fizzled. It was so active. And then they figured out maybe it's not beta-carotene. So then they figured out the formula. Anyway, Merck did all this. And they sold it to Japan. They showed the proprietary rights on how to make it to Japan. So for the last 45 years, Japan has been making the world's supply of coenzyme Q10. And now the demand for coenzyme Q10 is high. But Merck knew all about CoQ10. And so Merck knew that their statin drugs that block the ATMG-CoA reductase is the same pathway that the liver uses to manufacture CoQ10. They knew and could predict that you're going to have liver problems, you're going to have myopathy problems, you're going to have muscle pain, you're going to have muscle weakness. They knew that. So they submitted to the U.S. Patent Office 2 patents and were awarded 2 patents based upon their scientific literature. You can look this up. Go to the patent, look under Merck. The first one was given to Harry S. Brown in Texas, who won the Nobel Prize for this ATMG-CoA reductase, and he's a Merck guy. Another one was given to a doctor up in the East, and both of them were assigned to Merck. And the patent reads that the statin drugs block the production of coenzyme Q10, therefore you can expect muscle pain and weakness from the drop in the coenzyme Q10. Therefore, we are going to patent the use of coenzyme Q10 either with the product or given as an adjuvant to the product to prevent and to treat the complications of myopathy brought on predictably by the statin drugs. If you read the patent, it reads just like the PDR, only it does not tell you that coenzyme Q10 is a culprit, or lack of. Same thing with the liver enzyme elevation. So all the people taking statin drugs are told about the muscle weakness and pain, they're told about the liver, come in, we'll check your liver enzymes. Baycol has been taken off the market already for causing rhabdomyolysis, which is the very end stage of myopathy, where soupy muscle goes to the kidney and kills folks. So now they take Baycol off the market. It had exactly the same warnings as all the other statin drugs. It's right there in the PDR that you can have rhabdomyolysis from Lipitor and Zocor and Crestor. Seen those ads with Crestor where they have this Italian lady, you know, walking around? And, you know, I look at those and I think they're funny, but you know something? Those ads work. They work. They get people on these drugs.
They kill people.
And they kill people.
There's congestive heart failure.
It's right. We've got a study, Peter Longees did this study, where he took these people that were going to be put on Lipitor. He did special echocardiograms on them to look at early diastolic dysfunction. They put them on the Lipitor. 2 or 3 months later, they found 7 out of 9 of the patients had very early diastolic dysfunction, which means that the muscle has been hit. It's damaging, or rather it is weakened. Then they give them the CoQ10, and it relieved, in the 7 that had it, it relieved 5 out of 7, or something like that. Yes, sir?
How come the foreign countries, the physicians in foreign countries don't see this as an economic opportunity and take up what you just said and say to us or to the American patients, look, we can cure more of you for less, and it looks like they would have such an economic opportunity, and the word should...
By giving CoQ10?
What's that again?
By giving CoQ10?
By using all these techniques that you've just been talking about, namely
I'll get to
they
that.
haven't been bought out by the drug company.
Yeah. The only reason I'm telling this story is because it's not on diabetes, is to ask the question, why would Merck not exercise the patent? And the second thing, why would Merck at least not let doctors and patients know? In Canada, they carry on the label that this drug lowers the vital element of coenzyme Q10. We notified the FDA in December of this year that they either act on the petition, which we put in February the 2nd, in 2002, or we were going to sue them. And so they sent us back a note saying, well, we'll act on it by mid-February. And you see, the way these things work is that the reason they chose mid-February, because they knew that if we sued in December, we could get into court by February. But if they stalled us till February, they know that we're not going to be able to get into court until May or June. So they just bought another 6 months to go along with the 2 years of inactivity. And so if actually we, should know in the next couple of days whether we're going to go to suit to the FDA to do something on the petition to label this as a warning. We think that the FDA will likely do something like Canada has already done. They have to put the warning. But the question is, why would they do that? What's the incentive? They would have a better product with coenzyme Q10. That patent blocks blocks Pfizer and Bayer and all others from mentioning coenzyme Q10. Why, if they're not going to exercise the patent, why don't they just tell people? Anybody have an idea?
Because they can sell more congestive heart failure drugs and make more money that way.
So you think is that mischievous?
Yeah, old man Merck.
Let's give the drug, make more people sick, and that will help us more.
Old man Merck has been quoted to say, we got to make our own diseases in order to sell these drugs.
Really?
Yeah, World War II.
He was dumb enough to say that?
That was a long time ago.
Well, that's an innovative view, and I haven't heard that they would actually do it to make people sick.
Well, what do you think?
That's pretty innovative. But here's what I think. You see, you can put warnings like this. Oral hypoglycemic drugs have been reported to be associated with increased risk of cardiovascular mortality. And people will still take the drug. You read the PDR, it's like all hell will break loose, your eyes will fall out, your ears will come off, you still take the drug. And every one of my patients is scared sick on how his vitamins are going to react to his drugs. And they're paying money to see me, come there, and they still have that mindset. Can you imagine what the general population has? Well, see, I think that the public is so used to the awareness that drugs are toxic that it doesn't matter what they say. But if you were to tell a public that this drug blocks the production of a natural substance, they might say, wait a minute. So I think a bean counter says, okay, we can tell the public the truth. If we do that, we'll probably lose 12.632% of our compliance with the drug. That will calculate out over years to such and such billions of dollars. Or we could keep them in the dark, take that billions of dollars that we would probably lose if they were informed, and weather a lawsuit. We can weather a lawsuit, and our losses may be because it's going to be hard to find, hard to prove, get good lawyers, you know, even though we'd be sued in Alabama. You know, most of these suits are done in Alabama. Because the sharks know where the feeding water is good. That's true. Tobacco was sued in Alabama, Mississippi. Then if we do that, we're going to lose, you know, 7.2 billion. So let's take 12.2 billion is what we lose minus 7.2 billion. Okay, if we don't tell anybody, that will profit us by $6 billion over a 10-year period. So that's what I think happened as to why they didn't do it. Yes, sir.
American public equate drugs with health. That's what they're sold all the time. That's what Medicare is all about. Medicare prescription is about health. Drugs are health.
Crazy.
And if it doesn't have any side effects, how could it be effective?
You know, there's more to that than humor. There's more to that than humor. I honestly, I honestly believe that conventional physicians are so scornful of natural remedies because there's no danger to them. That's why they're scornful. You know, if it doesn't require their so-called expertise at monitoring side effects, you know, what difference does it make if it makes people better? If it's not going to hurt anybody, it must not be able to do anything. So I honestly believe that the mindset in doctors is that's one of the reasons, one of the many, but that's one of the reasons why I think conventional doctors are so seduced by the pharmaceutical company.
Julian, how about promoting that the nutrients taste bad? They must be good.
Actually, it does. You're right. We'll reverse it. We take a tip from the drug companies, right?
Julian?
DBI and metformin have the same. They found increased risk about 300%. Metformin turned to market in 1994. The alternative doctor picked it up, ran with it. Resident was recalled by the FDA, 61 deaths, 89 cases of liver failure. Let's see, the glucosidase inhibitors, very common side effects, gas, bloating, diarrhea, abdominal pain. Sounds like vitamin C, doesn't it? Not really. Vitamin C helps. Also associated with changes in the liver and liver function test. Not one of the oral drugs, not one, in a controlled trial has been shown to reduce the long-term complications of diabetes. Not one. Yes, sir.
Is glipizide in the same class as metformin?
Lipozyme, I don't know. I don't think so. No, it's not.
It's a sulfonylurea?
If it's a sulfonylurea, it'd be in the same class as glyburide, and that was the one that was stopped. They stopped the study on.
Life Extension recommends metformin for increasing insulin sensitivity.
Oh, you want to increase insulin sensitivity? You'd like to increase insulin sensitivity? Go for a walk. Okay? Eat smaller foods. Let's see. Take vanadyl sulfate. Take cinnamon. Take glucomannan. Increasing insulin sensitivity is easy. That's easy. There are a dozen ways to increase insulin sensitivity. You don't need metformin. As a matter of fact, metformin, you know, you can do perfectly well without metformin. And I like life extension. I do. Natural approach, weight loss, healthy nutrition, physical exercise, targeted nutritional supplements. Now, diet, you know, there's all kinds of diets, but I think, you know, I tell people you can simplify it by eating a big, colorful salad that if you don't have arthritis, you can put tomatoes in. If you do, take them out. you know, the nightshade plants, and throw on a little fish and chicken. Okay? It simplifies a whole bunch of stuff. You know, a big salad, throw on some protein. And it's easy, you know, get the Caesar salad. It's easy to do. You know, now there's all kinds of diets. We were talking about one today. In China, they found that people eating meat and milk, you know, have more cancer. You know, that's not new. None of these diets are new. So what you want to do is to reduce the refined carbohydrates. You want to increase the lean proteins, and you want to increase fruits and vegetables. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons that has been given, and McCullough mentioned this to me. McCullough, as you might know, is the fellow who discovered back in the 60s that folic acid would reduce homocysteine. He's working at Harvard. And he did this by looking at families who had homocystinuria. And these families were riddled with atherosclerotic problems and cancer, and none of them lived to be 40. And it's like they had progeria. But they died with these degenerative diseases, and their homocysteine levels were genetically altered because they really couldn't process the homocysteine. And so it's very, very high. And he says, you know, guys, I think homocysteine has something to do with cardiovascular disease. And they ran him out of Harvard because, you know, it was a cholesterol thing. So they literally ran him out of Harvard. He wound up at Stony Brook, New York. So now, homocystine's the rage. And their articles come out in the New England Journal of Medicine from Harvard.
40 years later.
Yeah, 40 years later. And the incredible thing, they don't cite his work in the bibliography. It's unbelievable what they do. Dean Ornish published in the early 80s how this very low-fat vegetarian diet, and et cetera, could reduce angina 90%, reverse cardiovascular disease, several studies. But you read a garbage study on angioplasty compared to bypass for angina, and the studies are never quoted. You see, there are services that can go in and pick out what studies are being quoted as references. And this guy from Sweden that did this ballooning, he's quoted all over the world. And it's a sham. All this balloon angioplasty is just a sham. But he's quoted all over the world. Emory brought him in and embraced him and made him a chief of radiology and a cardiologist. And, and they went forward with this ballooning. And so Emory became this center because Gruntzmiller, I think was his name, or Grunzwig or something like that, was domiciled at Emory. He published one study. 3 of the 50 people died. It didn't show anything except that he did it. The only result of the study was that he did the angioplasty. That was his whole study. It's probably been quoted 50,000 times as an initial reference in all this garbage that is thrown out by the heart surgery industry. Okay, adequate protein, you guys know all of this, but just the healthy diet, the vegetables, and etc. Exercise.
Quick question on that one. Why are you recommending whole grains for people with diabetes? Whole wheat bread isn't going to help someone who's hypoglycemic and has diabetic problems. I always see that. It doesn't make sense.
I agree. I agree. At the clinic, we really don't recommend it much. I was kind of a young critic when I first started, so I've had to reprocess and relearn a lot of stuff. And I debated Atkins a couple of times, and actually won, in my mind. In my mind, I won. But I secretly kind of thought he was right. So, but I think, we don't really use whole grains. We've gotten rid of pasta, we've gotten rid of bread. We have some in there. But, when we're dealing with people who really need to lose weight, we don't recommend a lot of whole grains.
What about potatoes?
We don't very good thing to do. Now, why? Well, first, you got all this food in your stomach. Okay? Now, all your blood is rushing to the stomach to suck it all up. Well, you get out and walk, you all of a sudden, whoops, push the blood down to your legs. So it slows down absorption. Secondly, you've already absorbed a lot, and so your blood sugar is going up. And as most of you probably know, when you exercise, your muscles can take up glucose without the use of insulin. Exercise will open up the door to glucose. That does not occur at any other time without the use of insulin. The minute the exercise muscle relaxes and kind of recycles or repolarizes, then it shuts off and can't take up glucose without insulin. But the exercising muscle can take up glucose without the use of insulin. I used to run with, I'll get to you in just a minute, I used to, in my, I ran a marathon. Anybody ever run a marathon? Did you run one? And you run one? Was it fun?
Yeah.
Did you say, yeah, you say no. Did you run one?
I ran a half marathon.
Was that fun?
Sort of.
Masochistic way.
I ran 7 marathons trying to figure out how to do one that was fun. And I'm a slow learner. So anyway, I used to run with these guys, the American Medical Joggers Association. They even gave a talk on one of them, how to enhance your endurance. And this is something, if you guys are, I know Connie's looking at me saying, what you doing? If you're going to run a marathon, this is what you do. You do not eat anything the morning of the marathon. You eat all your carbohydrates Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Carbohydrate load, that's a good thing. But your day of the marathon, you don't get up and eat a carbohydrate breakfast. You don't eat anything. You drink coffee, or you can take aspirin, but you drink coffee or take no-dose. And that's the caffeine. So now you throw caffeine into your system on an empty stomach before you're going to run. And what caffeine does is it clears the blood of triglycerides and it mobilizes free fatty acids. Now, by the mobilization of free fatty acids, now the body has a good, solid, lean fuel. Because free fatty acids are what you burn once you start running and warming up, because then you mobilize free fatty acids. Once you start running, and you now are warmed up and you're burning free fatty acids, then you can throw in glucose. And you can take it with you. I used to take these actual glucose tablets, and I put them in, I only did this one time, but I put them in socks and tie them on my pants so they were jostling around. I only did that once because I sweated on them and they got blocked me. Went all down my legs, got my socks. Now, if you take glucose before you run, that stimulates an insulin response. So now the body's going way up in insulin. Then you start running, and that plus the increased insulin will cause the blood sugar level to go way down. So then that will stimulate more insulin, more mobilization of glycogen to get the blood glucose up again. And glycogen is your energy fuel. When you run out of glycogen, you don't run. You can walk, but you can't run. So this was a way to start burning a very lean fuel when you start out. Well, you know, in diabetes, if you eat, go for a walk, you know, it will clear the blood of glucose, and you do that 10 minutes a day. That's 30 minutes a day. That is 3.5 hours a week. You know, that's 150 hours a year. That's a lot of exercise. But people don't do that. But you can. You can do that. Nutrient loss is a real problem. The metabolic control is the nutrient loss. It's not keeping the glucose down. That's important. But it's replacing the nutrients that are lost when the glucose goes up. Common deficiencies are everything. If you really measure the cellular blood or the cellular levels or the blood levels of these nutrients in diabetics, they're always low. There was a study done in 1974. The title of the study was Hypomagnesemia as an independent risk factor for diabetic retinopathy. And what they did was they looked at all the cellular blood levels of magnesium, and they stratified in quartiles the diabetic population, and then they stratified the normal population in quartiles. And they found that the highest quartile, the high 25% of the diabetic population in magnesium, did not reach the average level of the normal population. They were so low. But then when they went down and looked at these 4 quartiles in the diabetic, the retinopathy was much higher in the lower magnesium level. That was in 1974, and no one has acted on that. But the studies on these low levels of magnesium and other nutrients are all over the place. 25% of diabetics have low magnesium levels, insulin resistance. This was in Archives of Internal Medicine in 96. 63 diabetics were treated with lower magnesium, placebo 16 weeks. Those received magnesium had lower glucose levels, 8 versus 10. This is up in Canada, so it's just a 20% reduction. The A1C levels were 8 versus 10 as well. Vitamin A, these are always lower in diabetics. And I think the message that I'm trying to point out is that all of the nutrients are under stress and are being depleted by the process. And that the most important thing I try to tell our diabetic patients is, we're going to try to keep your blood sugar down. We're going to try to give you something to keep your blood sugar down. We're going to do, you might need insulin, whatever. We're going to try to do that. But whatever you do, you take 3 packets of the multiple vitamin. Well, other people take 2. You take 3 of them the rest of your life. Whatever else you do. I've been at it for about 30 years. Occasionally someone on long doses of insulin comes in without a great deal of problem. Instead of 15, 20 years, no problem. They are invariably the mother of a checkout girl at a nutrition store, someone that made them drink carrot juice. There's always something that forced them to supplement with micronutrients over the time that they had this problem. Well, this is an interesting study here. 130 diabetics took a multi-nutrient supplement. Now, this would be like Centrum, something like that, for 1 year. 93% of the patients taking placebo had an infection during the year, compared to only 17% taking the supplements. There were more than twice as much infection-related absenteeism in the placebo group. How many of you saw that report that the flu vaccine did not reduce death rate from the flu? I haven't had a flu shot in 25 years. But this here would substantially reduce the burden of disease on diabetics during the flu season. And do you think anybody's going to act on this? No. That was in Annals of Internal Medicine, 2003. 11 type were given 150. Oh, now Vanderbilt there. Yes, sir.
I have a very good friend who's a nutritionist, and he says that taking gel caps is better than taking just pressurized vitamin tablets, because the gel caps keep their potency longer.
Could be. And also the gel caps generally break down in the process. Yeah, vitamin tablets, the nursing homes find a lot of vitamin tablets in septic tanks and all that kind of stuff. They call them bedpan bullets. Wash them up. No, they don't do that. Hose them off. When we reduce someone's drug level, we want to give them something. We want to give them something like a drug.
Whiskey.
Whiskey, here, have a drink. But, it's really not the conventional physician's fault. Let's say you go in and you're a little bit overweight, your blood sugar level is pretty high, like 190 or something. Okay, what's he going to do? What would he do? So the drug is a comfortable relationship. You know, you can't deny that. So we try to use that. So we tell our diabetics, look, we're stopping these pills. Let me have those pills. Throw these pills away. But this is what we're going to give you. Instead of these pills, we're going to give you these pills. So we're swapping pills. Now, these pills are vanadyl sulfate. And we're going to do something else. We're going to give you this powder. This is glucomannan. You guys know about glucomannan? I'll tell you about glucomannan. And we're going to give you another powder. This one is cinnamon. You go down to Costco. You get the biggest jar of cinnamon they have. You take a half teaspoon with the cinnamon, you put it in yogurt or whatever, mix it in water, put it in a protein drink, and you take a half teaspoon of cinnamon 3 times a day. You take these pills, 2 of them, you take them 3 times a day, and you take this glucomannan, which is a powder. You take that 3 times a day. So we're not just taking away these single dose pills, we're giving you 3 things else to take. And this is for your diabetes, and you take this the rest of your life or you're going to die. We scare them. Okay, vanadyl is very interesting because it acts as an insulin mimetic. It's really quite a unique substance. And it lowers the glucose level, and no one really knows how. I don't think it increases insulin sensitivity. I think it's an insulin mimetic. It opens up some kind of back door somewhere. Lowers cholesterol, endogenous glucose production. It might reduce the liver's capacity to produce glucose. We have a product called Glucose Essentials. And it has 33 milligrams of vanadyl in it per capsule. So we use 3 or 4. So we're either at about 100 or 133 of the vanadyl sulfate. I think I'm the only physician, at least I'm the only physician I know of that does this. Even the alternative docs shy away from vanadyl. And I keep checking. Do you use it? Well, there's 2 of us. All right, maybe. 3 of us. I knew I liked this group. But that's good. 4?
The Life Extension Foundation sells vanadyl sulfate for about, well, all I can tell you is something like $10 for one.
Yeah. It's very inexpensive. You're right. See, I charge more for mine because I put in some Genessa sylvestra, I put in some cinnamon, I put in some banana leaf, banana leaf. I got it jazzed up a little bit, but basically it's the vanadyl that works. Chromium, I think most of us know about chromium. That's in a lot of, most of the sophisticated nutritional supplements will have chromium in it. It really does help.
You put those herbs in to make sure it has side effects?
Excuse me?
You put the herbs in to make sure it has side effects?
Yeah. I want some bloating, some flatulence. Cinnamon. Now, cinnamon contains the chalcone polymer. It acts like a drug. It's really cool. 60 type 2 diabetics, 136 milligrams of cinnamon. Look at this. Fasting glucose level fell up to 30%. Wow. Imagine that. Fasting, total cholesterol fell up to 26%. And the LDL cholesterol fell up to 27%, triglycerides came down 30%. That's in diabetes care, 2 years ago. And you need to take it in larger doses. Now, there's a lot of health food stores have cinnamon capsules at 500 milligrams, but I just tell them, get your big jug of cinnamon and a teaspoon. That's all you need. A half teaspoon gives you about 2.5, 3 grams of cinnamon.
Really sort of similar.
And the other one is glucomannan. Now, glucomannan looks exactly like sugar. And it is a mucilage, it's a fiber. You can take a half teaspoon of glucomannan, put it in about 6 ounces of water, and over about 25-30 minutes, it will totally absorb and expand the water to the point where you can turn the glass upside down and no fluid will come out. And it makes a really gloppy stuff. If you shake it and catch it, it's really a nice sensation when you squeeze it. Good stuff. And it will soak up stuff, it will fill the stomach, it's great for weight loss. I think some NIH group looked at all the things that were good for weight loss and found 2 that were pretty effective, and that was pyruvate and glucomannan. The most effective is ephedrine. And when I knew ephedrine was going to come off the market, I went and bought $2,000 worth of ephedrine. So I have some. See me after the meeting. There will be a price increase. I'm increasing the price next month.
Ephedrine is coming back as a prescription.
Is it?
Yes. A friend of mine who's in the pharmaceutical FDA department.
That's good.
Also, they just published an article which they showed that low cholesterol actually causes poor memory.
Yeah, absolutely. And increased suicide. Yeah, it's just, I mean, this low cholesterol is really a bad deal. Particularly when they're telling people with cholesterols of 180 to go on Lipitor. It's just insane. The lawyer that I work with and have been working with for over a decade in these FDA suits had a hearing before district court in Utah just 2 weeks ago on ephedrine and challenged the FDA ephedrine ban. Now the FDA ephedrine ban had 176 pages of research in it. I think it was 176, it might have been 760, but it was a big document. And none of those studies found any evidence whatsoever on ephedrine under 30 milligrams. But the ban not only knocked out all ephedrine, but it opened the door for the FDA to knock out all nutrients on a whim, a suggestion of toxicity. Well, he's going to win this in the district court because the lawyer that was there, and this lawyer is very, very good. He had his stuff together, and so he's going to win it. And then it's going to go to the circuit court. And I can tell you from literally 10 years experience with this, the courts are politicized. The court decisions are political. I lost a case where I was suing for the right to make a claim on saw palmetto that 325 milligrams of saw palmetto could relieve the symptoms of benign prostatic hypertrophy, such as frequency, nocturia, and residual volume. All of that is true and non-misleading. And it was in line with the cases which we had won, you know, on fish oil and on vitamin C and antioxidants. We now have a claim that B12, B6, and folic acid can reduce homocysteine, can reduce certain forms of cancer and heart disease. So we've gotten permission for some claims. You know, it's like the companies don't use them, but we at least are moving the FDA back. We probably have done more, and other people have said this. I'm not just saying this, but I do believe this is true. That a small band of us, including Life Extension and some other guys that have been with us, Dirk and Sandy, a small band of us have done more to move the FDA away from this freedom of speech and First Amendment violations than anything in 75 years.
True.
You think so? I accept that on the part of all of those who participated. Steve Folks has been involved, Life Extension has been involved, Dirk and Sandy started the whole thing. Dirk, how many of you know Dirk Pearson? I don't kind of. You know, listening to him is just terribly fatiguing. Because he just spouts his brilliance, and you just, and you want to. So now, whenever I talk to him, I just turn on a tape recorder and just try to take it in. But he's a very brilliant guy. He started out, said, we're going to submit these claims to the FDA. The FDA is going to deny it. Then we're going to sue. Because the beer claim said you could satisfy the government's mission with a disclaimer. And they're not doing that with vitamins. So we have a case. Well, it took 10 years to win the case. But it was set up. They knew we would, they didn't know we would want to sue. The bureaucracy, I joined them in '92. But it was a really, a neat thing, to see that go through. We go to the circuit court hearings, and we won. And then we lose the soft palmetto. You know why we lost soft palmetto? This is why I say it's political. This challenged the current drug approval process, plan. Because now a natural substance is being afforded the truthful, non-misleading claim that it can help a diagnosed disease. So it was political. Glucomannan cuts appetite, relieves constipation 3 weeks. Lipoic acid, I think most of you know about that. A lot of the work was done in Germany. This is a fat-soluble thiamine. Anybody had experience with benzothiamine?
I use it with MS patients.
Do you? Does it work?
Oh, absolutely.
Wonderful, yeah. We've used it mostly with diabetic complications. I don't see MS patients, but do you use it? Okay. Therapies for complications. We have some mechanical therapies with diabetics. We use that EECP, very successful with that. With the diabetic peripheral neuropathy, hyperbaric oxygen is very successful. Anodyne therapy is where this infrared, where we have let's see if we can find that. This hyperbaric oxygen. We have a big hyperbaric oxygen activity in that when we have diabetics with ulcers, we use hyperbaric oxygen all the time. With peripheral neuropathy, it's very helpful. We use it with Parkinson's disease along with intravenous glutathione. Anodyne, these are these little infrared things. It costs the machine costs about $2,000. So you put them on where they're hurting, then give them ECP and hyperbaric oxygen. If they don't get better, we take them out back and shoot them. 64, 30 years of insulin, retinopathy, laser surgery, treated with diet, return of sensation in feet, reduction in pain in legs, 2 weeks, walk around Disneyland for 6. We keep having our patients get a lot better with this peripheral neuropathy and go walk around Disneyland. I don't know if that's good. Our Epcot Center. This was a very satisfying man. He's 53 years old. He's lying in the hospital with a non-healing diabetic ulcer, IV antibiotics and all that other garbage. And he was scheduled for an amputation at 3 o'clock. Read the book Reversing Diabetes, gave me a call, said, well, can you help? Well, maybe, but if you get your leg cut off, I won't be able to get back on. So he comes in, we chelate him, we treat his wound with sugar. Anybody do that? Sugar diet, sugar wound treatment? It's wonderful therapy for open ulcerative wounds. Just sugar and wrap it up. Regular, whole sugar. Don't mix it with iodine. Don't do anything with it. Don't use honey. It's too greasy. Honey is probably better, but sugar's easier.
White sugar.
you put the sugar on the wound that is a open wound, it creates a hyperosmotic environment. And in a hyperosmotic environment, there's not a single bacteria that can survive. It kills all bacteria. It then, because it's hyperosmotic on top of the wound, sucks water out of the wound. So it acts to wick water out of the wound. And it is wonderful for cleaning wounds.
You just take a regular white sugar.
Regular white sugar. You know, and you explain to them it's not going to go into your blood, it's not going to raise your blood sugar level, you know, it's going to kill things. And it's very easy to do because you have to show the patient how to do it. You can take a sponge, you know, or one of those gauze things and stretch it out and glop. This is fun. You get a handful of Vaseline, okay, and then just do the sponge like that, and then make a donut around the wound, so that you can you can fill up that donut with sugar. Then you wrap it up and teach the patient how to do that, and it will cure most wounds. And remember this when you like cut yourself, you know, you're out in the woods camping, you cut yourself, you know, you can't, you know, and it has to be deep enough to, you know, to be a warranted wound. Just load it with sugar and you can keep it from getting infected.
Are you talking about straight granular, or you mix it?
The good stuff.
You mix it with water?
No.
No, it's just straight sugar. Just powdered
straight sugar.
Granular sugar.
Yeah. See, it's important. You don't want to just sprinkle it on the wound. That feeds the bugs. You want to put it on in top so it dissolves in the body fluid and creates a hyperosmotic environment. There's a guy down in New Orleans that's been doing this with all of his post-op. You know, this decubitus ulcer is a huge problem in the orthopedic service with older women and men who have hip replacements and things like that. They're lying down, and man, you get a decubitus ulcer, and it's like a death sentence. So this nurse back in the early 70s said, well, you know, I lived on the farm, we used to use honey. Says, okay, try it. You know, very uncharacteristic physician. So she tried it. He comes back, he checks all the ulcers. They are pyogen free in 24 hours. There's just no infection. Yeah.
How often do you have to change the sugar?
As much as you want, or as little as you want. Probably once every day or two. What you don't want is for the sugar to leak out and for it to dry up. You know, to dry up. So you just, it's a very easy thing to do. And then you can tell the patient to take it off, wash it. Get it in soap and water. Wash it good. Dry it off, put sugar back on it, and wrap it up. Nothing could be easier, more sanitary, more effective for these decubitus ulcer wounds. Well, we did that. Everything healed up. He went on. He had a very nice career teaching girls softball. He lived his life. He did great. They would not, his insurance company would not pay for the chelation therapy, but they had already agreed to pay for the amputation and the prosthesis. So I told him to go sue his insurance company, and then when he asked for evidence, you know, stamp on his good leg and stand on it and stuff like that. Okay. This is an interesting patient. This guy came to us about 8 to 10 years ago with diabetic retinopathy, and he had 5 laser treatments in 18 months. So we tuned him up, and he has 20/20 vision. I think he only had 1 laser treatment, or 2 or 3 laser treatments in 6 years. Well, this is the one.
Say something about, that was type 1. You've been talking all about type 2 all this time.
Yeah, these are type 1s. I mean, some of the type 1s are the ones that have the major complications.
So you do insulin therapy, but then you also still do all the other stuff you would do with a
Sure,
type 2.
absolutely. Yeah.
You took the infrared laser, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Well, it's infrared anodyne. It's not a laser. It's a diode, right? Oh, before before I really don't like to talk about drugs and xenobiotic compounds, right? They're poisonous. I'm biased against them. However, I will let you know about a drug that's great, and that is Dilantin for the use of non-seizure disorders, such as depression, cognitive dysfunction, ADD, anxiety reactions, worry gnats, this type of thing. Now, Jack Dreyfus has done a lot of work with this. He spent $72 million of his own money. This book has 3,000 references with summaries of each one on the non-seizure use of Dilantin. And I do it with a lot of my patients, is that I'll have them do the 1-hour test, which he describes in here. Where you just have your patient sit down and free associate and write how they feel. Write anything they want. Then put that in the desk, give them 100 milligrams of Dilantin, and then have them sit back down again an hour later and simply free associate and write what they want. And it is amazing what this particular drug medicine will do. It is unbelievable. And it doesn't up people's mood as the neurotransmitter drugs do. And it doesn't create spaciness the way Xanax and Valium does. It simply is like a cool breeze. The best way to describe it is a cool breeze that blows through the mind and blows away ruminating thought, anxiety thoughts, free-floating fear, worry gnats, short fuses, and then it leaves that palette, that mind's palette, free for your own thoughts that you originate. And by originating thought and acting on the thoughts, your tone and mood goes up, and you just live much better. Excuse me? I got some in the car. Side effects. There aren't any. The non-seizure use of Dilantin is from 100 to 300 milligrams a day. The lowest dose used for seizure is 300 milligrams a day, up to 600 or 700 milligrams. So it's a very low dose use. There aren't any side effects that I know of. There are some sensitivity reactions to it. Some, maybe 1 or 2 out of 100 have a sensitivity reaction. I've run through some of that. Other than that, I haven't had any. Yes, sir.
The lady here was taking Dilantin for a seizure. All kinds of things went wrong. She landed in the hospital. They cut the Dilantin way down. The point is, any story that Dilantin doesn't have side effects, forget it.
He says that dose.
They essentially wiped her out for weeks. What's that again? For seizure.
But he said, for seizure, yes. He said, he talking about the lower dose.
Well, we're talking about 100 to 300. It's just turned out that it does have very severe. It did have very severe side effects on this particular person.
I can understand that. I can only state my experience with it, and I can state what they published here. Is that the side effects in the use in individuals that don't have seizures and don't have other problems which might be activated by it is very slight, because even in most seizure patients, there's something like 2 or 3 trillion years of patient dosing without significant complications in seizure. Now, you have an idiosyncratic reaction with anyone, so I'm not saying that she did not. I'm fully in agreement with that. But in the way that we've used it, with those kinds of reactions we don't see, nor are they present in here, and it's experiential. I had 2 kids, they were twins. They were in the 6th or 7th grade. And one of them had obsessive compulsive disorder, where he was washing his hands so much they were bleeding. And whenever he'd go out of a door, he'd wear a sweater and he'd pull his thing over to open the door handle, okay? And he was reclusive. and a little depressed. So we put both of them on Dilan. It went away instantly. He went on. He was the editor of this high school newspaper. They both went to Stanford. They both graduated from Stanford. And once they started, I put them on their own. Do with it whatever you wish. And he would notice he would take 1 or 2 a day and everything would be fine. He'd go 2 or 3 days without it, and he'd start pulling his sweater back over his hand again. It's amazing. And I understand your concern, and I appreciate it. And everybody take note of his and her experience. But my experience with them, with the use in people who don't have seizures, but have ruminating, obsessive, even depressing thoughts, can be helped. And you can get this book at either with Amazon.com or in bookstores. And it's by Jack Dreyfus. It's got in it, the most valuable thing in this particular book is the 1-hour test. You can just read what some of the people's experiences were just 1 hour after taking 100 milligrams of this particular substance.
If you call the foundation, they used to give them away for free.
I did. I've called them, and they might still give them away for free. I don't know that they do now. But I think they said that the cost is only $12. But I know they used to send me a bunch of them free. And yeah. And Jack Dreyfus used to send, there's one in here on the this section right here. It's all in one book now. This broad range of clinical use of phenytoin. He sent to every doctor. And this is an anthology of over 3,000 references on non-seizure use. Now, this was in your case was used for seizure. The title is A Story of a Remarkable Medicine. And it also, it's 3 books. It's his autobiography, and then the other one is, the other book in here is the book, A Remarkable Medicine Has Been Overlooked. That was what he wrote back in the 70s or 80s. 70s, right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.
Everybody, that's it. Thanks for coming. See you next month.